Welcome to the Plastic Entanglements exhibition in Penn State's Palmer Museum of Art. My name is Peter Buckland of Penn State's Sustainability Institute. The Plastic Entanglements features art from all over the world exploring plastic as a material in our daily lives, in our history, in our environment, and even in us. I'm thrilled to be host to a conversation with the exhibition's co-curators and two Penn State scientists whose work deals with plastics. Joyce Robinson is a curator at the Palmer Museum of Art and 1/3 of the curatorial team responsible for plastic entanglements. Dr. Jennifer Wagner-Lawler is a professor of women's, gender, and sexuality studies and English at Penn State. She is the 2/3 of the curatorial team. Dr. Melik Demirel is a professor of engineering science and mechanics at Penn State. His research focuses on engineering novel materials. And Dr. Denise Wardrop is research professor and professor of geography and ecology and the associate director of Riparian. She's an ecologist whose work has centered on the relationship between humans and the aquatic resources on which they depend. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So I want to start with the curatorial team and ask you guys, so where did the idea come from and why now?
Well, it was sort of a pipe dream of mine. I actually wrote up a proposal in August of 2014, so it's been 3.5 years in the making. But, and I'm neither an artist, scholar, or art historian, or scientist, or any of those things, but I am a scholar of utopia. So utopian literature and experiments, and I've always, therefore, been interested in making the world a better place, if not a perfect one. And I got involved some years ago, 9 actually, with an anti-single-use plastics environmental organization, and began to become aware of the extent to which plastic has just invaded our lives, for good and not for good. It makes the way we live possible. It's convenient, it's versatile, it's colorful, it's fun, as in toys. It's revolutionized probably almost every single industry, but maybe most importantly, transportation and also medical care. And all of these positives are undeniable. It's part of our modern culture, it's part of modernity. It's changed modern design, it's changed the way we use materials. And the exhibition tries to show that positive side and just, the kind of variety and color and ways that it can be used. On the other hand, there's a flip side to it, and the exhibition also tries to show that, especially as related to the consumer market and our use of this material. Plastic represents a kind of nexus, a place that all sorts of different issues and concerns come together, revolving mostly around our culture of consumption and the unimagined and still kind of unimaginable impacts that plastic has on the environment and on ecology. So the level of waste that our consumption of plastic has created is really a global catastrophe in some ways. What we throw away, right, our plastic waste, is shipped often to somebody else's here, right? So that here, too, will not be where we live, affluent people, right? It's going to be dumped or shipped somewhere else, usually in countries that need the cash and don't have the infrastructure to deal with the waste. That's a bad combination. So, and at least not until recently have people realized that the oceans turned into the biggest garbage dump of all. Much of our plastic waste ends up there. So we're beginning to see it now, because in the last 20 years, this kind of overconsumption and this proliferation of waste is coming right back to us. The ocean through transporting it on its currents, is throwing it back up on shorelines all over the world. Now, one reason that I think it's important that this exhibition is here now is that inland areas tend not to see the problem so much, right? So a lot of people on the coasts are kind of like hip to all this, and that's where a lot of activism takes place. But it's everywhere, and you know, Pennsylvania, Center County, Spring Township, where there is a plan to possibly let Nestle draw water out of the aquifer, and also to create a new plastic bottling plant. The problem's right here. And this side of the issue, I think, the problem of plastic and the impacts it has on water, on creatures, on communities, that's why now. I mean, in fact, it was kind of serendipity, but I just think that I always wanted there to be a kind of awareness brought to a community that is inland and may not be thinking about the impacts of plastic pollution, and the Nestle's situation makes it all the more critical.
Well, wow, that's a great big overview, right?
Yeah.
So Joyce, I'm wondering, as a professional curator, what was compelling about this idea? Why is this material interesting to artists?
Well, I think you could see what was compelling to me. And I will just say that as an academic art museum, we're embedded in a university. I think we are fortunate that we have this wealth, right, of knowledge and expertise and passion around us. And I want to acknowledge too our third member, Heather Davis, who is no longer here at Penn State, but she was a visiting scholar with the Institute for the Arts and Humanities. She brought a lot of great passion and fervor toward this project as well. So from my point of view, I saw this exhibition as potentially cross-disciplinary, as potentially truly entangled across the university. And that's what academic art museums can do. We no longer follow the mausoleum model, we follow the laboratory model, right? And we are not simply imparting knowledge, we are questioning. And so the gallery becomes a place for critical thinking and creative thinking, as you will find out today. There's a lot of creative thinking going on around plastic. But what we discovered in the 3.5 years working on this project is that there's so many artists that deal with plastic, either as found objects. Pamela Longobardi, for instance, her Economies of Scale, that's a magnificent piece, is all found plastic. Aurora Robson, right behind us, as she says, she interrupts the waste stream, right, and then creates these really gorgeous, scintillating, lovely, textured sculptures. You've got artists like Jessica Stockholder, who really is not coming at it from a political standpoint, but really just loves the color of plastic and the malleability of plastic. And we also wanted to tell the story of artists who are interested in the material itself, that are using 3D printing, that are using machine plastic as a casting material. And so we're trying to be entangled. We're trying to give this very broad picture of this material that, as we've said, is both miraculous and malignant, right?
Wow, yeah. So it's a fascinating material, fascinating set of materials. So, Melik, I'm wondering if you can tell us what are plastics and why do we use them for seemingly everything?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. So the plastics are synthetic materials that are moldable. So the history of plastics goes almost 120 years. The first time that has been used is basically the bakelite. And then the other types of plastic appeared. And it comes to a common use in the last 60, 70 years within our the home use, car use, and daily uses.
So you said it's used in home, it's in cars, it's in almost almost everything. Can you give us a wide range of the things that it's used in?
Right, so if you look at the problem from transportations, in the airplanes, most of the moving parts are plastics. In the cars, bumpers are plastics. Inside the cars, the leathers are plastics because we are not using natural leathers and we can't, so they're expensive. And in home, the insulations are plastics. Your water bottles are plastics. Whatever you're wearing today, unless you're buying an expensive cloth, it's plastic. So from nylon to elastane to polyester, these are all common plastics that are used in the textiles.
So it is in almost everything and on almost everything.
Exactly.
Wow. And so if it's in and on just about everything, that is all going places. So Jennifer just said it's going into oceans, and I know that this is an area of your expertise. Can you tell us where it is and what it's doing?
Yeah, and I really appreciate this exhibit as a scientist and especially as an ecologist, because as an ecologist, I look at relationships. And I think to explore the relationship with plastic is really interesting. When we choose a material that's so useful, it's we're not allowed to divorce it, right? We're lifelong partners with it. And so I think I'm really interested in how what I know as a scientist can give us context for how we might change that relationship. So given that opportunity, because it's so useful, I'm stunned by the fact that we produce, the globe produces over 320 million tons of plastic a year. That's equivalent to the weight of humanity. So literally, every year we completely reproduce ourselves in plastic. And you have to wonder where all that goes. And so if we say that the best estimates say only 6 to 26% of it is recycled. And so that means that up to 94% of it is going somewhere else. And so we can kind of think about where it's going. And so we can, in essence, kind of break it into, I find it useful to really break it into sort of fourths. So let's be generous and say a fourth of it is recycled. So let's take that off the table. Another probably 21 to 42% ends up in landfills. And so for the moment, let's take that off the table. And so we say, okay, our best estimate is that, okay, we've tied up 65% of it. Well, where's the rest of it going? And the rest of it is actually going into the environment through various pathways. Either through simply mismanagement. You know, it's plastic bags in the trees, it's plastic bottles on the side of the road. Some of it is going through other kind of pathways you don't necessarily think about. So when we might talk later about microfibers that are in our effluent or leave our washing machines and go to the local wastewater treatment plant, most of them are filtered out, but that sludge that gets applied on agricultural land, so it has another pathway to the environment. So we can talk about just basically all these things in the environment. So I think it's useful to talk about, let's talk about the story of a plastic lid. Okay? Where might that end up? And say we find it, it's somewhere on campus, and it ends up getting washed into a local waterway. And it might start actually to break apart from sunlight, from going down the stream, just mechanical action. But ultimately, 70 to 80% of what ends up in what's in the ocean comes from streams, lakes and streams. So this is probably going to end up in the ocean.
Sure, so it would go down Spring Creek and eventually Susquehanna, Chesapeake Bay.
Down to the Chesapeake Bay and out to the ocean. On its way, it's going to get broken up a little bit, perhaps, and it's going to end up in sediment, and it's going to be in water. And there's fish that can eat it on the way, but then eventually it's going to go out into the ocean, right? And it's going to start circling around, and sunlight is going to make it brittle, just like things you leave out in the yard, little plastic toys get brittle. It becomes more susceptible to mechanical abrasion and wave action and wind, and it's going to start to break apart. Well, what's problematic about that? A fish doesn't eat this. This doesn't look like food. But once it starts to break down into things we call microplastics, which are about 5 millimeters, or really about the size of the nurdle over there in that wonderful piece, Economies of Scale, but roughly about a little bit smaller than the nail on my pinky. Now it starts to look like food, and now it's highly transportable, right? And it's going everywhere. And it's estimated that it takes most plastics about 400 to 1,000 years to degrade. So these things are in the system a long time. Once it's tiny, we don't see it. And I think that that's part of the problem about how we deal with it, is that we see trash in the big Pacific garbage patch, and we think, well, maybe the answer is we'll just pick that up and clean it up. What we don't realize is that a tremendous amount of it now is in tiny particles. That cycling, it's in 85% of northern fulmars, which is a bird in the Canadian Arctic, have plastic in their guts when they open them up. Everywhere we've looked for it, we found it. We found it in soils, we found it in sediment, in streams and lakes. We found it in the ocean, we found it in the air. We found it in krill, we found it in fish, we found it in table salt. It's literally everywhere. And eventually it's going to end up probably in us. And so one recent study says if you regularly eat seafood, you're probably ingesting about 11,000 pieces of little plastic a year. And about 1/3 of the seafood of the fish in the UK has been found to contain microplastics. So it's pretty much everywhere we've looked. And I think we have to think about that, and eventually it's got all these pathways, and eventually it's going to end up in things we care about.
So what I'm wondering is, I mean, the material itself, or the materials, because there are all sorts of different plastics, right? So you can say, well, plastics end up in us, they end up in other creatures, but what does it do to those creatures or do to us that we might be concerned about?
Well, I think there's kind of two general classes of impacts you can think about. One is just physical. So there's a wonderful piece in here that's the camel gastrolith, basically, that shows the number of plastic bags in the gut of a camel. And so it's taking the place of food, right? You're not getting a lot of nutrition out of pieces of plastic. So it can be simply, it's taking the place of things you need. But the other one is what travels. As it breaks down into small pieces, there's two things that can happen. One is that, first of all, it can start to sort of leach things out of it. Some of the components of that plastic begin to leach out into the water. But probably something that's more problematic, and Malik can probably talk about that, is that what starts to go along for the ride. So what starts to sorb on to these little tiny pieces of plastic and then gets carried into guts or carried into other parts of the environment. And those things can be anything from heavy metals to PCBs. So some of these organic pollutants that are persistent and that really do have health impacts. And so it's not only what the plastic gives off, but it's what likes to go along for the ride with the plastic.
Can I add?
Yeah.
There are studies being done, I'm sure that the scientists will know better exactly what these are, but that are showing that these chemicals that are now in our bloodstreams, like phthalates, for instance, are actually impacting fetal development, right? So it's not just that we ourselves get these heavy metals and toxins in us, but that it's being passed to a developing child, and there have been links made to physiological changes, or what do you say, morphological changes that are taking place, and including, often it affects the reproductive system, right? Also, there's been links to certain kinds of breast cancer in women, things like that. So it's kind of insidious in that way as well. You can correct me if I got anything wrong.
Well, I think one of the issues too is that we're beginning to learn a lot. So we didn't really think to be looking for this problem. And once we sort of came to understand, well, wait a minute, I mean, there's some fantastic videos of people in what should be pristine parts of the world with all this plastic floating by, right? And so that's the way we generally come to acknowledge an issue is first we go, wait a minute, where is it? Well, we've started to look for it and we're finding it everywhere. And now we're going, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? And we're starting to investigate the impacts. And so, we're learning a lot, but there's still a lot to learn. And I think as we're learning about what might be solutions.
Yeah, so actually,
as well.
that's one of the things I wanted to ask is that, so you work on materials a lot. I mean, that's what you do. So how are people approaching the material itself so that we might be able to prevent these problems?
Sure. In order to jump to the solution problem, I think we have to first also ask, what is the problem? I mean, this is a very interesting problem of 21st century. It's very different than the problems that we had observed in the previous centuries. So this is a problem of primary drivers of three independent factors, which I call the society, because now we are living in a society where commodification of different ideologies are contributing to this problem. And second problem is the regulations. How many different types of regulations we have in the plastic. And the third part is the technology, which I think where maybe the partial answer is in it. Currently, there are many efforts to create plastics using biological sources. Basically, going back, we have to ask the fundamental question. For example, we have been using rami, shishel, silk, and wool for the last, hundreds of thousands of years. But why did we change it to plastics in the last 100 years? Why nylon replaced silk? There's an economic problem, obviously. So because nylon is 10 times cheaper than silk. But that's only the commodity. But what's the environmental consequences of this is the current problem. And other problems of other approaches to solve this problem is trying to use biosynthetics, basically trying to create bioplastics. The example that we have shown could be made by bioplastics that can dissolve, that can degrade in the environment. But what are the consequences of that is also another question. So we are talking about a population which went almost from 100,000 to 10 billion or 8 billion these days. So, and we have to ask the question, what are the needs? Why did we come here? And it's not a simple solution. It's not a simple technological solution because, as I said earlier, this problem is very much entangled into different parts of the society.
So, I know, Jennifer, you said that you've been involved with the Plastics Pollution Coalition, and so there's a material side of it, but then there's also the demand, the consumer choice side of things also. And so, how are organizations like that taking this problem on?
I think a lot of the organizations started out with sort of the beach cleanup, right? Something everybody feels good about, and you walk away with this big sack of trash. But as time's gone by, I think many of these organizations, they still do that, because it's, good publicity. but they've also developed into much more sophisticated educators, essentially. So, you know, trying to get the public educated about all these things that we talked about, and to realize that just picking stuff up off the beach, or even recycling by itself, is not going to be the answer. So, so talking to people about their consumer practices, right? So that's one area that the environmental community has been focusing on, but also on the other side, trying to influence companies and legislators to try to stop plastic production at the source, stop making the stuff for purposes that are not essential. I mean, I don't think anybody argues that it should all go away because, look, for example, I mentioned, you know, medical technology. You know, use it for valuable things. You know, we think of it as a cheap material, but it's not. It's a very valuable material, and so use it for those things. But single-use plastics that, you know, we use, we drink a bottle of water in, you know, 2 minutes and then we throw it away. Let's find a solution for that kind of thing. So it has to be a kind of multi-pronged approach, and I think environmentalists, at least the group I work with now, they're really more about educating the public about the uses, valuable uses, and the abuses of the use of plastic, and how, you know, advertising, kind of, you know, consumer ideology that we live in is making us kind of blind to these problems.
And can I add something to that? I think we don't have a plastics problem because of an intention of malice.
Right.
I think I tell the story about taking students to a river community on the Amazon, and as a service, we would pick up plastic trash. Those people have a deep earth ethic, and what's really interesting to me is in their consciousness, the reason there's plastic debris around is that they can't possibly comprehend that something doesn't biodegrade.
Right.
And so I think there's something about the permanence of plastic that we just have to sort of revisit our assumptions about the permanence of certain materials and what happens. And so I think our brains aren't quite there yet where we get, this stuff doesn't go away. And so I think that what this exhibit does that's so wonderful is ask you to, in light of that, reconsider your relationship and make some maybe different choices.
And that makes me think of this thing that you brought with you.
Right.
We should use that as an example.
And I think Melik can really talk about a microfiber problem, but there's a significant source of these microplastics that come from, you know, we feel good about when we buy material that's made out of recycled bottles, right? I have a fleece I love, and it's partially made out of recycled plastic, made me feel great. Well, as I wash it, those things, those fibers, wash off and kind of go out my washing machine effluent, and however they might find their way to the Chesapeake Bay. And this is simply, it's called a guppy bag, and you put things that have synthetic fibers in the bag, and you wash them in there. It catches the fibers, and then it doesn't basically solve the problem, but it allows you to control the microfiber pollution in a way that then you manage it. It's not just free.
Sure.
And then what happens with that? I mean, what happens with it?
That's a great question,
I
right?
mean, like, do you wash it and then they all...
So that's what I was referring earlier.
Yeah.
So the problem of solving this problem, the solution of solving this problem could be two phases. One is basically to go solutions how we can prevent it, and the second thing is create the next generation of recycling. So, you know, although next generation of recycling is the bottom choice, the top choice of our primates should be the preventive. So how can we prevent leakage of textile origin microfibers, which is the biggest problem today? Or how can we teach people not to use single-use plastics? So, and meanwhile, in parallel, try to develop new technologies that can help to prevent microfiber pollutions, or that can replace some of these plastics with resources that are very similar to what nature uses, so that we go into the complete cycle of nature, where these things could be eliminated or can be reused by other parts of the nature. So these are the important parts that we should really think about.
Great. So obviously, this exhibition really can get people talking about an awful lot of things. It shows how entangled plastics are in our lives from day to day, and how entangled we are with things even that are across the globe. It's really, really remarkable. I want to thank you guys for being here with me today, and I especially want to thank the two of you and Heather Davis for co-curating this and really getting a pretty incredible conversation started here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.